Good morning, good day, good evening, good night, goodbye, see you later. No, actually, wherever you are on the planet, whatever time zone, this is Spiritual Technologies 2.0 Summit, the second season. And it is really rocking and rolling. We've had some just great flow experience and amazing things that have come out of these conversations. So I'm really excited today. We have Dr. Daniel Cohen. Say hi, Doc.
Hi there.
And I'll read your bio just really quickly in a moment, just to catch everybody up to snuff. And then we have Jonathan Robinson, who is a colleague and a friend and author of The Technology of Joy, among many other volumes. So just go to Amazon and rock out on Jonathan. He is quite a pioneer, an amazing spokesman for transformative experience and technologies, and just a heck of a lot of fun and very bright. So, hi, Jonathan.
Hey, John.
And I'm John Dupuy. I'm the CEO of iAwake Technologies, author of Integral Recovery, a revolutionary approach to treating alcoholism and addiction, a bunch of other stuff. And I've really had the honor to be here for these almost all of these conversations that we've been having about spiritual and transformational technologies as we emerge into this new millennium and this time of great change on the planet, and the necessity of these tools that are just extraordinarily obvious to any of us who's looking around and listening to the news lately. So let me start with the bio here. Dr. Daniel Cohen is a neurologist, inventor, and author with a focus on technology and writing related to personal and spiritual development. He is the lead inventor, of patented tools to awaken technology, introduced in 2013. This technology resulted from 15 years of research on healing and psychospiritual effects of synchronized sounds, vibrations, and electromagnetic fields on the nervous system and our energetic spiritual self. After conducting the aforementioned research, he authored the book Addicted to My Ego in 2015, which clearly articulates the difference between one's egoic and spiritual self and how to engage and practically embody our spiritual nature. He also co-authored Claim Your Basic Rights, Create a Practical Partnership with Your Soul, and Claim Your Basic Rights, Embody Your Soul, with Jennifer Palmquist. They both teach personal and spiritual development. And there it is. Welcome, Daniel, or Dan. Would you prefer Daniel or Dan?
I think Dan's fine.
Okay, Dan. So, all right, you want to riff off of that and tell us what, one of the questions I always like to get into is, how did you, being a doctor, a neurologist, how did you get into this field of, what led you there? What was the vocational experience or the call that got you where you are today?
Well, actually, I became a doctor because I was interested in spiritual issues first. So back when I was a teenager, I remember reading Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda.
Yeah.
And I figured, I wanted to approach this, but I wanted to look at it as scientifically as I could. And I figured the best way to do that was to start by becoming a neurologist, to learn what is known about the brain. And also, I picked up a lot about psychology and psychiatry along the way, because I wanted to have that as a foundation. And I also wanted to learn what medicine knows that they're not talking about, because oftentimes there are many physicians that will learn things from patients or clients and not really report that in the literature simply because it's not sanctioned, so to speak. And therefore, you can't get it through any review boards. You can't get it through anybody who looks at publications. And so I wanted to know what wasn't really disseminated.
Yeah, the data doesn't fit the theory.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's an excellent point. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go off on that a little bit.
Sure.
Because I think, the theory right now in medicine is that mind results from brain. But that's really not the case. And if you look at a population of people that have a certain illness, and the illness is called narcolepsy, because this very well demonstrates it. I think a lot of people have heard of narcolepsy, and essentially these are people that have sleep attacks, so they fall asleep when they shouldn't. They move right away into REM sleep rather than waiting 90 minutes. They have cataplexy, where they lose muscle tone. It could be generalized or it can be isolated to a part of the body when they have strong emotion. And they also have sleep paralysis, which means that after REM sleep, where we are all normally paralyzed so that we don't act out our dreams. These people also stay paralyzed for another 90 seconds or so. And so if they wake up out of a dream, they can't move. Well, those are the 4 cardinal manifestations of narcolepsy. However, if you go into a narcolepsy support group before the physician walks in the room, what are they talking about? They're all talking about their out-of-body experiences. So all of these people have, pretty much all of them, have out-of-body experiences where their cognition is anywhere else other than the body. They can perceive their body. They can think out of body. So clearly, mind works through the brain. It does not emanate from the brain. And that's a pivotal point when you really consider the human energy system and trying to integrate all that we are with this body, which many people would or do believe dramatically enhances healing capabilities.
Interesting, and also completely kind of shatters the reductionistic scientific worldview that is still, I guess, pretty dominant in medical schools and medical circles. Huh?
That's right. It's fully entrenched, and that's why you don't hear about what I'm talking about regarding narcolepsy. But if I didn't go through my medical training, I never would have encountered that.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be listened to with
right.
with the respect and that opens a lot of doors. So bless you for going through that to be what you can do today.
No, my pleasure. I went through it for a reason.
Hey, well, Jonathan, you want to jump in here?
Well, I was just saying we need heroic people like that who are willing to pay the price of getting credibility so that they can introduce something new. The history of humanity is every time something new comes along, we fight it until it eventually becomes obvious. And I was just talking to Jon Kabat-Zinn, really the founder of mindfulness movement in America. And he started in 1978, and society fought it and fought it and fought it. And now they realize it's the best treatment for healthcare for the money that anybody's ever found. So it's taught in all the hospitals now. I'm teaching it in prisons. It's taught in over 7,000 prisons as well. And he just said, well, I had to spend 30 years fighting everything, and now everybody's coming to me. And people like Dr. Cohen are in the same position. They have the credibility, and they can eventually introduce something new to the culture.
Fantastic. So Dan, what is, you're reading about some of your technology you developed. Can you speak to that and how that kind of fits into what we're talking about, this kind of new paradigm or emergent thing? And when you say, the brain, the consciousness comes through the brain instead of the brain generating consciousness, I mean, that is just that's a huge deal. So it just changes the whole story about everything. And so how is your specific work in technology, as this is about technology, the kind of the meta subject of these conversations?
Well, if you think about the paradigm that what you are is not the brain and the physical body, okay? So I don't care what you call it spirit, call it soul, call it higher self. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is, it's probably energy-based, okay? And we also know that if indeed it interacts with the brain, and the brain is electrochemical and electromagnetic, right? So that means it has to interact with at least electromagnetic energy. And I'm not saying that the spiritual self is electromagnetic energy. I'm saying that it must interact with it if it uses the brain, if it filters through the brain, and that's what we truly are. And it's here, obviously, to experience this life. So when you think about meditation, for instance, what is the goal with meditation? Meditation is to quiet the brain, or what other people would call the mind if they're sitting with the old paradigm. So quiet the noise inside the head, relax the body, and then really become one with all that is. Okay, I think that's a fair assumption that most people would agree with in terms of a goal for meditation. And so I was always interested in, after reading about meditation since I was an adolescent, which is quite a long time ago. I was interested in what can I do to enhance that experience so that people can get there more easily. Because also, as part of my medical training, and I was interested in different ways of relieving stress and different mind-body techniques that could get people there faster. How can we help people move there? Because, quite frankly, a lot of people can't meditate well. And even good meditators say, I'd like it to be a lot deeper than it is, and I'd like to experience a lot more. So I set out with the goal of, let me create technology to do two things. Let me try to quiet the brain so that I can turn it off. And the second thing was, can I stimulate the human energy system directly so that it can better integrate with the brain and the body? And so those were the two goals. And so we started with sound and vibration, in essence, to quiet the brain. And the theory behind that is quite well established neurologically. And that is, if you think about the primary function of the brain, it is to allow us to survive. Okay? Survival instinct is the number one function of the brain. And how does it do that? It has a vigilance mechanism. It's always scanning the environment for potential danger, consciously and subconsciously. And for that, we use our eyes, ears, and our sense of touch. Okay? And what if we can basically turn those off so that the vigilance goes way down and the brain quiets itself? Okay? And so one of the ways to do that is to habituate those centers of the brain. In other words, give them a constant stimulus such that the higher centers of the brain say, hey, these lower centers aren't helping me to watch out for potential danger, therefore I'm going to inhibit them. All right? Now, we don't do anything with vision because in our SolTec Lounge, one lies there in a very comfortable position and their eyes are closed and the room is dark. So there is no visual input. We play music, and the music we construct is layered. So multiple melodies are happening simultaneously. So the auditory cortex receives this pleasant but nonsensical musical piece and it basically says, I can't follow this because the melody keeps changing. So I'm going to ignore it. Mm-hmm. Okay? And it's pleasant and it's reasonable. So it's not in any way distasteful, and it's in no way annoying. So
it's not intrusive. In other words, it's not getting in the way of anything.
Exactly. And then from a sense of touch, we create vibration from the music. So the same frequencies that are in the music get transmitted to the body in terms of your ability to feel it. So the whole somatosensory cortex that receives touch also becomes habituated. So all of the modalities that are associated with my vigilance mechanism to scan the environment for potential danger basically are shut off. Okay? And then we do something that's very unusual in terms of instructions for meditation. And that is, we tell the user or client to fall asleep. And so if you start out up here and you're awake, we say, go to sleep and allow yourself to go down. But because the music changes in intensity and volume periodically, it bounces you up. So you sit in this drifty state. So you're not awake, fully awake, you're sort of drowsy, drifty. And then our other instruction is, every time you have a thought, direct your attention to your body and feel the vibrations. Now, some people who are further along can feel their own inner vibrations. And if they can, use that to feel and feel it whole body. If you can't feel that yet, you will if you keep using our technology. But if you can't feel it yet, just feel the vibrations that are coming from the music that the SolTec Lounge creates from the music. And just feel that, establish it full body, and then again, drift off again, so that you sit in that really quiet, drifty state and notice what your body feels like. And if you're paying attention to your feeling nature versus your thinking head, you really get out of the head and the brain shuts down. And what we see is people move into a theta state right away. So the brain waves are very much like either profound meditators or light sleep, but without some of the characteristics of sleep, yet the person is awake. They're aware. And in the beginning, they're drowsy, but over time, they become more and more aware. So we put people in that state. Then the other thing we do is we've learned, and this took us 15 years to learn this, how to stimulate the human energy system in a way that it looks more normal. Most people, let's get to the human energy system in terms of a brief description. Most people understand the hara line or the spirit line or the sushumna. So there's that center line of which everything emanates from. So your chakras emanate from that, auric bodies, emanate from the chakras, but also in the high heart area, your soul, or what I would call your etheric, astral, and causal body also emanates. Okay. And for many people, that's not well overlapped with the physical body. In our society, for instance, most men are overlapped from the head up. Okay. And for women, it's a little deeper into the chest.
When you say Dan, when you say overlapped, could you clarify that?
Yeah. Most people do not embody their spiritual self well. Okay. So if you thought of it as the Venn diagram and you thought of the spiritual self and you thought of the physical body, for men, it would be head up. Okay. When it comes to these aspects that emanate from the high heart,
sure.
So the spiritual self that most people would call soul rather than the spirit line and the other structures that emanate. Okay. And the way we learned this early on is I did over 2,000 sessions with a guy who would go out of body every time he got on our technology, and he would sit in the room and observe my energy system. And as we stimulated different areas, we learned how to stimulate electromagnetically to basically cause a much fuller embodiment of one's spiritual self. So for instance, if we look at a picture like this, most people have an energy system that has pretty poor overlap, that white fluffy stuff. And you can see that the chakras are poorly formed. The hara line is frayed, fragmented, or curved. Okay, so it's not really complete because there's a lot of energetic blocks. But with our technology, the middle picture is what results. But in a sense, it's like a drug. It has a half-life. And so with one of our sessions, somebody will remain like this for about 2 days. Mm-hmm. And then with regular use and over time, you start to look like this. So you really start to have a much more advanced medical or energy system where the hara line expands, the chakras are white, there's much greater spin, and the embodiment one can feel.
Yeah. Okay. So what is a practitioner feeling phenomenologically after they've been doing this as a practice for a certain time? And they start looking like that picture that you were showing us, where the chakras are really out there and the energy is really clear. What does that feel like? And
all right, that's a great question. And there's tremendous individual variability based on a person's gifts and perceptive capabilities, going into this. So if you were perceptive to begin with, you become more perceptive much more quickly. Okay. So if your interest is, I want to see spiritual entities and these kinds of things, I want to be more psychic, so to speak. Okay. That happens because you're better integrated with that aspect of you that confers those capabilities. Okay. Your spiritual self. On the other hand, if you don't want to experience stress and anxiety anymore, that happens very early in the process, because as you are embodied more spiritually, it's like truth and love don't mix well with lies. Okay. And so one starts to experience what they truly are. And that level of calm comes very quickly in this process. And we're very good as human beings learning what that feels like. And we're very good at recreating those feeling states. And that's why the SolTec Lounge works so nicely for simple things like stress reduction. But in terms of meditation and taking you further in terms of energetically and spiritually, as you embody more of your energetic system and as your energetic system is able to be in body more. And the reason I say it that way is because the body has to learn to accommodate, okay, to these higher energies. Mm-hmm. And that's why it usually takes a couple years before, before you see somebody develop a picture like this, mm-hmm. Where it's all white. And usually from that state, obviously, I'm sure you've heard about Kundalini energy.
Sure.
So when does that get released in the process? And what we found is you have to be in this state for a little longer, and then that Kundalini energy is released, and that's a further, motivator to the energy system and the body for greater integration. So if people are interested in things like, true spiritual awakening, then those are the kinds of phenomenon that need to occur that yield those results. Because in true awakening, for instance, what does one experience? They experience the oneness of all that is, that connectedness. And that comes from the bridging between one's spiritual self and one's physical body, including one's nervous system. Okay.
There's something, John, you asked what's the normal experience, and I have a chair in my office, so I use it. I have friends come by and use it. And something I've been struck with is that with a lot of spiritual technologies, they often will lead to very similar experiences in people. If somebody's using, say, the Think or the Muse or your iAwake technologies, it's pretty common experience that people have. With the SolTec Lounge, I found that there's more of a range depending upon where a person's starting from. And so some people will say, oh, that feels really relaxing. Some people have very profound openings. Some people feel stoned afterwards. It's really a range, and also that there's a range every time you use it. So it's not a completely predictable experience. Almost everybody likes it in some way. But that's one of the things I like about the technology. It seems to be creating experiences that are opening in ways that are not completely predictable. And, I have like a waiting list of friends that want to come by and use it because of that. So I think technologies that open people up and give them experiences help to be reinforcing. It makes them want to try it again and hopefully get the benefit energetically from that.
For both of you guys, Jonathan and Dan, do you find that the reason that people go, maybe it's just to deal with stress, correlates with the experience they'll have, or they just go for one thing and they get what they need, or they get what the universe wants to let them, experience in that session?
I think the universe gives them what what they need. That there isn't that much of a correlation between. Some people come for, I'd like to just kind of relax and fall asleep, and they have a profound awakening or experience, and other people come for a profound experience and they just say, oh yeah, that was nice and relaxing. So you never really know.
Right.
In my experience.
Well, yeah, that kind of makes it exciting. I mean, our first, when I was growing up, our transformational technology was psychedelics, and we didn't know what we were transforming. We didn't know where we were going or what we were doing, but we were sure transforming, and it certainly wasn't predictable.
Yeah.
So I had at least as many trips to hell as I did to heaven, and that's I think that's continued into my spiritual practice now. I jokingly was thinking this morning we're going to have a new product called Digital Agony, and it is the path of suffering out of narcissism or something like that along those lines. So I'm kind of kidding about that, but sometimes in practice or whatever, you have to confront the shadow. You have to confront suffering. And that was the next question. Have you found that this technology is effective dealing with PTSD, trauma that's kind of stuck in the energetic system, that sort of thing?
There are significant effects related to PTSD. If we rarely, but we do see some people will get in the lounge, and then after a minute, they'll literally jump out of it, turn around, and look at it like it's the devil. Okay. And,
Yeah,
and that's a tip off right away that you're dealing with somebody that has PTSD.
absolutely.
Okay. Now, most people with PTSD don't do that. What they will do though is they will re-witness, not relive. So they don't suffer through the trauma, but they witness it from a higher perspective. Okay.
Yeah.
And some people will even verbalize it during the entire session. So they will speak to the trauma, and those are fascinating sessions if you're a therapist and you're
Sure.
watching. But we found that the whole process is very cathartic from that standpoint. You get the same kind of effect with chronic pain because, as you probably know, a very significant percentage of people with chronic pain have substantial psychological overlay. And that psychological overlay comes out. And so if you have somebody with chronic pain, I always put a big box of tissues, right by the SolTec Lounge, because they will just weep, for the majority of the session as part of the catharsis.
Amazing. And what you're saying, I think to compassionately and effectively deal with this traumatic injuries and pain and psychological, physical, a combination thereof, spiritual, is to be able to witness it, have that kind of expanded context. So, I mean, if you're right in it, sometimes it's just like going through it again. It's too much for people to take. So when you have the capacity to step out of it, at the same time, it does its thing. It releases and it transmutes and does all these things. But you have this more expanded, mindful way of receiving it makes it possible for most people.
Well, and John, I think the reason or what's so instructive about that process and about their response of re-witnessing versus reliving is the fact that there is this much greater spiritual embodiment that happens as a result of the use of the technology. So with that embodiment, there is that higher perspective, that can witness it from a different perspective and not be engaged in it and have all the lower level emotional and mental turmoil. And that's really quite pivotal. And that's the same, kind of phenomenon that happens over time as you learn to live in that state of greater embodiment. Your level of mindfulness is significantly elevated, so that the real you starts observing the ego. Okay.
Yeah. And there's less repression, I would imagine. In other words, when you're in this open state, yeah, you still hurt, you still suffer. Ken Wilber says we suffer more, but it bothers us less. In other words, we don't get stuck in. And early on, when you're a child or before you have any of these kind of psychological or spiritual knowledge or sophistication, it makes a lot of sense to split these things off. It's a brilliant survival move. But after a while, those things in the basement start growing up in the living room in the front yard and causing all kinds of havoc. And then with time, I think we're able to, at least in my experience, is that we're able to really take whatever comes up, whether it's joy, happiness, or trauma, or grief, or fear, and it comes through, and then, we come back. It does its thing. And we're much more resilient.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what we've seen.
Well, brilliant. And both of you guys have been using this for a while, yes? And Doc, Dan, do you still use it on a regular basis yourself as part of your practice?
I use it almost daily. I'd say I average 6 days a week. I do a session. I've got a group that meets every morning at 8 a.m., during the weekdays. And we do it very, very regularly because we still see more and more benefit accumulate with increased usage.
Yeah, you don't know how deep is. You don't know how high is, or how infinite is, or how big expanded
exactly.
is.
Exactly. And the idea is not to just enjoy it in session, but to learn to be that way all the time.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the key. So as you deepen this response, you basically can appreciate it and allow yourself to exist in that state more and more of the time. So for instance, if I'm in session and I'm practicing deep surrender, to all that is, and I'm feeling that connectedness throughout all that is, then why would I just want to leave that in session? Why wouldn't I want to carry that forward into my day? And so with regular usage, I'm able to do that better and better, more deeply throughout all of my daytime functioning.
Yeah, and the proof of the effectiveness of the technology is not just being able to induce altered states, like fun drugs, that you play around with and you go back in yourself, but it's what happens when you're off the cushion, or what happens when you're out of the chair as you begin to move in the world. I think that is a real kind of verifying essential that says this is not just kind of a narcissistic dabbling, but this is an actual transformational spiritual tool.
Exactly. That's exactly correct.
Awesome. Hey, how about you, Dan? What have you noticed since you've been, I'm sorry, Jonathan?
Well, I travel a lot, and unfortunately the chair is rather big, so it doesn't fit in my suitcase. But I always enjoy using it, and I find that it has an effect for at least 2 or 3 hours afterwards, where it makes it easier for me to feel my body and be aware of my body. So it fits into my mindfulness practice. And, I just like the feel of it. So I use it when I can. And I find that, so much of what we're trying to do spiritually is now be embodied to feel our body more, because our body is always present. And the vibrations of the chair, which really are vibrating your entire body at once, are kind of like a training wheels for that. So a lot of times after I use the chair, I actually am really feeling my entire body rather than just being a head up. And that helps with my other spiritual practices. Yeah. Because I think being able to feel your entire body in the present moment is really one of the keys to all higher experiences in life.
Yeah, and I've noticed with I-Awake technologies, it's usually the guys that are people that are pretty advanced practitioners that come to us. They can tell right away. I mean, there's a attunement to subtle energies and physical body and energetic body, causal body, etc. They can kind of feel that right away. I wonder if you find that too, that people that come in, they're advanced practitioners of yoga or meditation, immediately kind of, oh yeah, I know this one. This is just really bringing it forward very powerfully.
Yes, that's exactly the case. And that speaks to what Jonathan said earlier, that the response is very varied based upon where people start out. So, we'll see many people who are interested in nothing more than stress reduction. Right. They just want to be able to learn how to relax. And therefore, they're not far along in terms of a spiritual practice. And they will get on the SolTec Lounge, and they will move into a deep state of relaxation. And I think Jonathan referenced that they'll come out and they'll be like stoned. And many of them are. I mean, they're just so profoundly relaxed. And that state is so unfamiliar to them of being that relaxed that they can't believe that they could ever be that relaxed.
Yeah, I know. When I started going to graduate school years ago, it was transpersonal psychology. Man, when I just started meditating, I was so armored. I couldn't feel anything. I was just like walking around. And one of my kind of the first kind of breakthroughs when I started noticing the armor. And I can imagine if somebody comes in like a perpetual state of just tension, that's the water. I mean, that is your how you live your life, and all of a sudden that just relaxes. I mean, that's rather almost a shocking awakening to another way of being.
Exactly, and we see that regularly, and especially with the instructions of just let yourself go, let yourself drift off to sleep. Don't worry, the technology will keep you awake, so you're not going to sleep through the whole session. But by the same token, feel your body. And when you have a thought, come back to the body, feel it, and then just sit in that drifty state early on. But they maintain more and more, wakefulness as the sessions proceed. And so they're fully cognizant of this profound level of relaxation that they can mimic. And then, it's not surprising from a medical standpoint. I can tell you it's not surprising then that all of a sudden their symptomatology associated with stress-related illness all starts to dissipate because they're not experiencing stress the same way anymore.
Absolutely, yeah. And stress, I was writing, I think, anyway, one of the things I wrote a while back, it says that there was a physician who was in charge of one of the major GP practitioners, and he said that clearly 60% of all the ailments that people were bringing into their practices, doctor's office on a day-to-day basis, were stress-related. And I don't even think he was mentioning addiction in there, which is
right,
very much stress related. And often people are starting to use these drugs that give them this profound temporary relief from the stressed out, depressed states that people walk around in. And so I imagine this would have, 60%, and not to mention like the biggest healthcare disaster in our country right now, and maybe the world, is addiction to these addictive substances. And we're moving on to doing it with computers and pornography and all kinds of things now. But if this could be an aid in treating that as maybe not a cure, but maybe a 40 or 45 or 50% nudge in the right direction, I mean, that's pushing toward phenomenal. And that's pushing toward, you add a few more things there and you have pretty much a walking cure. I mean, an effective way to help people through these things and without, just going the pharmacological, cocktail that's so often prescribed for just about everything that ails you these days.
Yeah, the SolTec Lounge is beginning to be used in some treatment centers for the reasons you cited. And and it is very effective, because if you can experience that level of relaxation and not have to, escape, and, via, the various addictive properties, excuse me, then, obviously it's a much healthier way to go.
Brilliant.
I was talking to Dr. Cohen about bringing the SolTec Lounges into spas, because a lot of people who never would meditate or do spiritual practice will go to a spa. And I think it's a good way to show people that technology can help them experience different states of consciousness. And so I'm kind of excited about that, just because, I speak mostly in the corporate world, and I talk about the technology of joy, and that is a group that really needs this stuff, but they don't use it. In a way, people who are spiritually inclined and are doing lots of meditation need it less because they're already having access to methods. But a lot of people are only going to get into this stuff through something that's incredibly easy, where all they have to do is lie down on a chair. That's why massage is so popular. I mean, look at how many massage envies are out there. But something like a chair, I called it Give Peace a Chair, because we all need a way to decompress every day that is super easy. And the SolTec Lounge fills a niche that people who are stressed out after a day of work and they just turn the tube can actually experience something a little bit higher that might be going somewhere for them. So that's something I like about, Dr. Cohen, you talked earlier about how some people tune into what you called an inner vibration, as opposed to just the vibration in their body. And I'm wondering if you can say more about what that is, or how that works with people who tune into that.
Many people who use the SolTec Lounge regularly start to feel a vibration that is within them that we associate with greater spiritual embodiment. Mm-hmm. So when there's greater spiritual embodiment, more of the spiritual self throughout the body, one can feel this subtle vibration. And many of those same people can hear it too, hear it as a vibration that is definitely not tinnitus. So it's not ringing in your ears. It is a vibratory state that one can hear. And what those people experience over time is that vibration becomes higher and higher in frequency. So, and if you think about the function of the brain in the somatosensory cortex, we can only feel up to about 400 hertz. So as you're experiencing a higher vibration through the body, it actually elevates beyond the ability to feel it as vibration. And then it almost feels like this light sunburn when you become more advanced. And then it literally dissipates, because you become just more of all that is. And so that no longer feels the way it did when you were feeling from the somatosensory cortex. And the same phenomenon happens from an auditory standpoint. The frequency gets higher, 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 and you start to also hear many frequencies simultaneously. Okay, so that changes. But I do want to comment on something else you said, I mean, which I don't disagree with in terms of the need to have this for people that are, you know, not meditators, so on and so forth. But I, you know, as somebody who was a meditator, and really I did this for people like that too, and I did it for myself primarily. You know, I gave a lecture a few months ago, and after I finished, a guy got up in the front row, and he stood up and he says, "You know, I just want to tell you that I hate you." I said, "Why is that?" And he goes, "Well," he says, "I've been a meditator for 20 years, and I thought I was pretty good at it. And then I got on your lounge, and I had the best session I've ever had." And he said, "It made me feel like I wasted 20 years. And obviously he didn't.
Right.
But he had a great session because he was further along. And so for people that are interested in developing themselves further, like me, you know, this is an incredible tool because it's an accelerant. You know, it's not, you know, to look at the people you were describing, Jonathan, earlier, you know, you could say the SolTec Lounge is like lazy man's meditation. But I look at it and say it's an accelerant for those people that really want to further their spiritual experience.
No, yeah, I'm not interested so much. You know, I'm a 6 on the Enneagram, counterphobic. I'm not interested in lazy man, but effective tools to get us there. Because I struggled on and off with meditation for decades. I knew it was important, but I just couldn't keep it up because it wasn't fast enough. It didn't get me, you know what I mean? It's like other things priority, but to have things like this. And there's a couple of things I wanted to say, but one thing, are you noticing that people that are using SolTec, is that right? The SolTec table, is that what we're saying?
SolTec Lounge.
Lounge, that's right. Are they starting to get in touch with their own kind of inner guidance, heart intelligence, wisdom voice, this thing that seems to be another, besides, you know, just having groovy experiences in the lounge or on the table, is when you move through the world, but getting in touch with that inner direction, that kind of vocational, this is what I'm here for, this is what my, you know, what I was incarnated for this time around, that stuff starts to emerge also.
Absolutely. Excuse me, but you know, that information is all contained in your spiritual self.
That's it.
Okay. And if you look at it energetically, that aspect of you emanates from the high heart area. Okay. That personal spiritual self.
That's
all right. Which I would call soul versus spirit. All right. So that aspect, as it becomes better integrated with you, okay, which means you're not going to be just head centered, but more heart centered. All right. And that area, that aspect of you speaks head and heart. Okay. Because in intuition, that sense of knowing is a feeling sense. It's not a thinking sense.
That's right. It's a different type of knowing.
Right. And that knowing comes from that aspect of your spiritual self, of your personal spiritual self. And so as that is better embodied throughout one's self and better integrates with one's body and nervous system, then one's knowing ability improves. So you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, and you get the big strategic, this is what Jonathan Robinson's here for, and and this is what Dan is here for. But then you can get your kind of tactical marching orders from moment to moment, day to day, the relationships, the circles you're working in, just kind of more skillful wisdom of how you're supposed to be showing up and what you're supposed to be contributing or not. All this stuff starts to become, and it really kind of transcends existential despair, when you realize, wow, there is a heart intelligence, a wisdom that is soul. I love the way you said that, Doc, soul, which is your personal spiritual connection. And then spirit is that, that connected to everything, but your little manifestation has a deep connection with all that is very personally groomed to what you're supposed to be doing. And all that starts to come online. And then you have what religion's been trying to do, hopefully been trying to do in its best sense for millennia, starts to become a lived day-to-day, moment-to-moment reality. And that's so exciting.
That was brilliantly stated. I think you encapsulated it very, very well. And the only word I would add to what you said is becoming your authentic self.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happens. You become much more authentic and you live the life you came here to live.
Yeah, brilliant. You know, and I'm a gym rat, and I live in a place where I have a very primitive gym that I work out with, and I'm traveling, which is quite a lot. I'm always going to gym, you know, Gold's Gym and all these big, you know, small gyms, little gyms. But if we could get some of your stuff into, you know, one of the rooms of, say, a Gold's Gym, a big organization like that, and you'd have 7 or 8 tables. And I think the paradigm or the understanding that needs to emerge is that you need to do as much interior work on yourself, practice on yourself every day as you do on your body. So if you could, you know, you could get it down to 30-30 or 40-40, or I'd like to say, you know, an hour, just because maybe I'm a little more screwed up than everybody else. I need that much. But, you know, that would really integrated, healthy, holistically, you know, sane, vibrant, intelligent, wise people are going to start emerging. And we've been so focused on the exterior in our culture, you know, you know, we've done a bunch of stuff. We plopped somebody on the moon, I was reading today, somebody said, and we've done a whole bunch of stuff. But now, of course, that just focus on exteriors becomes just shallow, suffer. Yikes. So and a lot of us don't want to go back to fundamentalist answers to it, which are an answer, you know, but it's got all kinds of other baggage. And so to get this in a way that people that are at least, you know, experiencing the modern world and postmodern world and post can bring this together is just, it's incredible. I'm really, you know, obviously I'm excited about it.
You know, something I want to add is I'm very familiar with both your technologies, and just to let the cat out of the bag, I use both of them together sometimes. Now, the SolTec Lounge comes with 2 tracks of multi-layered music, and Dan is creating other one. Dr. Cohen's creating other tracks as well. But I use the iAwake technologies on the chair as well, and it's done 2 things. One is it leads to it, you know, it's like ice cream, you know, the difference between having 2 flavors and 31 flavors. Sometimes you want, you know, you want Rocky Road, and sometimes you want vanilla, and they do lead to different states of consciousness. So I think it's a way of taking the iAwake technologies and expanding the repertoire of what they feel like. Absolutely. So now when I listen to an iAwake technology, even not on the chair, it has kind of a 3rd dimension to it, because I've been on the chair where I feel the vibration of that, and I'm feeling it like in the 3rd dimension, which I now can, when I now listen to it, it has new complexity and subtlety that it didn't have before. So they really complement each other well, and that's one of the things I like about the whole idea of technology of joys, is that we're just learning to take all these new technologies and mix and match them sometimes. And some are very complementary, you know. Sometimes you want a fine wine with your steak, and it really works together well. And that's a fun exploration to begin with.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you've been such a wonderful pioneer long before I started doing these talks. And these talks have just like blown my mind. You know, we were focused on our little thing, and, you know, anyway, it's a yes and, and it's collaboration. And I wanted one follow-up question for you. You're saying, Jonathan, and you too, Dan, if you want to, do you notice that when you're, you know, doing a traditional meditation, you know, you invited to the Zen, you know, Zendo or the temple or whatever, or the church, and you're in prayer or in meditation, do you notice that you, because of the practice with, in your case, with both these technologies, Jonathan, and Doc, your practice with the lounge, that you can actually just enter into these deep states much more quickly and effectively?
Well, you know, I personally find that, but I'm not a good example because I do lots of different practices, so I don't know what's actually leading.
Right.
To that. I think it would be great if we could do more studies to find, you know, get data about this. And, you know, now we have things like easy GSR and EEG through the Muse and other heart rate variability. And hopefully, you know, Dan being a neurologist can start studies like that. I think we do need data like that, because some people aren't going to go by experience. They want the hard data. And over time, I think that type of data will be collected and people will see, yeah, this really does have specific benefits that you can tune into and are validated. Have you done any research like that, Dr. Cohen?
We did some research early on that we didn't publish that looked at brainwaves, and we certainly showed that we moved into a theta state. We didn't, obviously we looked at things like pulse and blood pressure too, and we saw the commensurate changes that one would expect. Having said that, we've positioned the product as a consumer product, not as a medical product. So I'm not in a position to make medical claims. So I have to be very careful that I respect that. So now having also,
we know exactly what you're talking about, Doc. Trust us.
Right. Having said that, there's an extremely well-known medical institution that is starting to do some studies with it. Then they don't want me to say their name yet because they want to be able to come out with the studies and they don't want other people to know. So there is an institution that's working on these things and will expand it into other medical applications. But quite honestly, I'm not sure what we're going to do with that data. I honestly don't know, because I think as you gentlemen both know, the FDA is not necessarily responsive to technologies like this for medical applications. And so I'm leaning more towards exploring the medical applications in Europe and Asia than I am here in the US. And then we'll back into the US when, the US sees that these things are happening in Europe and Asia.
Yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? We've been getting tremendous response from all over the planet right now, and not so much from the United States, weirdly enough. I mean, most of our users are in the United States, but people that are wanting to, invest and take this into other things are really coming from all kinds of very interesting places on the planet. And, I think, kind of when you're working with this technology, transformational, it's kind of developmental. At first, you just go for phenomenological, which is I think it's super important. But then as you grow and you get a little more finance and money, you can start doing more and more of the scientific stuff. I would like to see us get enough in the industry to be financing them so we could do both at the same time, because I think the phenomenological and what people are, the healing and the joy and the transformation, what they're reporting is equally as valid as looking at some kind of biometrics and looking at what the brain's doing. They're both different parts of the same reality. And when you put them together, then you have, okay, we're not crazy. This is what's really happening. And then the people who are more scientifically inclined can say, oh, this is true, and start coming towards the more interior experience of it. And then the people that are kind of immersed in the subjective can become a bit more objective. And it's just a better, fuller universe and a better way of looking at reality, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I actually think that what we really need is some excellent scientific tools that allow us to measure the human energy system.
Yeah. And
there have been a number of attempts to look at that. And quite frankly, as a scientist, I'm not too impressed with the results. On the other hand,
hold on, Dr. Dan, we need you.
I'm sorry, Jonathan, I didn't catch that.
We need you to create those tools.
Yeah. And actually, we've begun to work on some experiments to look at some things like that. And as you probably can imagine, the amount of resources that are required to look at that kind of thing are in the tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think it's gonna take a level of success on the so-called therapeutics before we can afford the diagnostics.
Yeah, and I have a friend who's an investment private equity person, and she says there's billions, if not trillions of dollars just moldering in accounts. And I don't even know if these are actually moldering dollar bills or they're just little digits or, what money is actually. But, so if there's any wealthy people out there listening to this and the universe goes, help these people develop this, please do, because unless money is just energy and unless it's funneled into something that's healing and transformational and good and, joy inducing and peace inducing and authentic happiness, inducing, what the hell good is it? Not, well, I mean, some things, but so come on, people, open up your pockets and your hearts and let's get busy. I mean, it's ridiculous. The only limitations are in our heads. There's no reason that there shouldn't be, the kind of research that we need to do this, to get this out to the whole world. So that said, Doc, how much does this thing cost for the man or woman off the street?
Right now it costs $3,400.
So it might want to be something that people could, buy as a community thing. You have a group of 8 or 10 people that want to, use it together, and they have a practice room and they can share it and share it with their friends and stuff like that. Or if it, for some people, that's not, that's not a lot, but, for most of it is quite a bit. So have you had people doing that, like sharing the cost and getting the technology so they can have like a practice room in their neighborhood or in their community?
We have had some people do that. We've had a number of people just purchase it outright. We're also seeing more commercial institutions evaluating it for purchase on a broader scale. And, I should say that as our sales volumes go up, and we're also doing some additional development work to lower costs. So I would expect that that we'll have a lower cost product available in another 1 to 2 years as well. So, people can check our website, SolTecLounge.com, and see, what the existing price is whenever they choose.
Brilliant. And I'm sure they can get a hold of you there if they have any questions about what we've been talking about. This has been great. Well, anybody, we're kind of getting to the point of wrapping this. Jonathan, do you have anything that you wanted to, share or impart or?
Well, the one thing that occurs to me is that we're in this exciting time of exploration. Dr. Cohen has this new tool that I think is going to get to a lot of people. And I like playing mad scientist. You try this and see what effect it has on you. You try it with the I Awake technologies, and the SolTec Lounge. You try it with different music. And it's exciting because we haven't had these tools before. If you were born 100 years ago, you were given one tool. You either pray to Jesus or you do Buddhist meditation. And now everybody gets to play mad scientist. And I think what we have to realize is that different people are at different things, and you really have to find what works for you, because it's not a one-size-fits-all world anymore. We have personalized medicine, and we need personalized meditation and personalized spiritual technologies that will get us to the next place. And so it's a really exciting place time for people who are willing to experiment.
Yeah, and one thing I want to piggyback off that we found with people that use iAwake, or it sounds like your technology also, Dan, when you begin to get into that kind of wisdom place of the soul, then the practice, you get the practice going, then the practice begins to inform you. In other words, you start learning what kind of practice you need to do, and that can change over time. And sometimes you may be doing kind of a Buddhist thing, or maybe a Sufi thing, or it may be a centering meditation that you kind of sense into what you need to be doing for where you're at right at this point. And I mean, that can even shift in one meditation. You can do several of these things, so it begins to emerge, and you find out that all these practices from the ancient wisdom traditions were actually developed by people who are in the same states of consciousness you are, and they're kind of being informed by this greater wisdom you tap into, and that's where these things develop. And you go right back there and tap into today with this, with the increased efficacy of this new emergent spiritual technology. It's rock and roll. It's really, really exciting.
I agree with you, and what I've learned over the years is that with further change, I've been given insights as to how to change the technology. And so we've continued to refine the technology. We've done some things that we found that we're not actually going to release in a consumer version because it's frankly too potent. And I'm not quite sure what I'm going to do with it yet, but it literally allows you to dip into the level of the subconscious that, you have to be ready for. And so who's the right professional out there who's going to dictate that? Because I don't know that the medical establishment is interested in this kind of thing. but yet it needs a level of supervision that is somewhere between, somebody who understands the thinking of the mind and somebody who understands the higher self.
Yeah. And so it takes wisdom.
Yep.
And which is one of the fruits of ongoing interior effective contemplative practice. And unfortunately, modern medicine hasn't quite got there yet, except there are individuals like yourself that are, going through that in order to come out the other end to be able to bring growth forward. But it's a hugely challenging situation for our healers who don't have any idea of kind of a guided sense of wisdom. Mm-hmm. It's just really, that's why going to the doctors can be such a lame experience. I mean, you have to really kind of know it's what you need them to do in many cases, and they'll, kind of take them through it. Anyway, I'm not going to get on that one, but anything else, Dr. Dan, Dr. Cohen, would you like to say before it's just a kind of a summation or?
Well, I just want to thank you for doing what you're doing here, because I think this is really a big help in terms of, increasing awareness about this whole arena, because we really do need that level of consolidation so that it can be brought out to the public in a more comprehensive way, and to inform people about these options and that they actually exist and can confer considerable benefits. So thank you very much.
No, thank you. And Jonathan, thanks for, it's always great to hang out. And anyway, so thanks everybody. It's also a spiritual practice to talk like this and communicate like this. And so I really feel that both of you guys, your years of dedication to the interior journey, and it shows, and I can certainly resonate and feel it. So thank you very much. Blessings.
Thank you.
The SolTec Lounge is ideal for inducing profound levels of relaxation and deep states of meditation effortlessly. Deep relaxation and meditation can reduce or eliminate the stress response. The technology within the lounge plays layered music with vibrations and magnetic field therapy generated from the frequencies of the music. It's a full-body immersive experience. The instructions for use are quite simple, only 2 steps. Step 1. Allow yourself to fall asleep. The technology will keep you in a drowsy, drifty state of being. The goal is to put your brain to sleep so that all intrusive thoughts are gone. As you gain more experience with the SolTec Lounge, you will develop greater awareness even though your brain is switched off. Just fall asleep and let the SolTec Lounge do the work. Step 2. When you have a thought, realize you are thinking and place your attention on your entire body. Feel the vibrations or sense of heaviness throughout all of your body. Then relax and let go and drift off once more into that drowsy, drifty state. Enjoy this stress-free state of being.